back, everyone. I am so excited for today. I have a special guest on, but before I introduce her, I wanted to let you know that this will be the last episode before the new year. I'm taking 2 weeks off and not making myself do any podcast episodes. So enjoy today, and I will see you in the new year. Now, I have Angelica Ray here with me today, and I actually met her through someone else on Instagram. Of course, I feel like I introduce a lot of my guests. I'm like, I found them on Instagram. And I scheduled a session with her. I'll let her say what she does, but I scheduled a session with her, and I got there and she's like, oh, did you see the date and time today? It's February 2nd, 2022 at 2 p.m. And I was like, whoa, that is so weird, because I had been seeing twos everywhere and I continued to see twos everywhere the entire year. So that was wild. Okay, without further ado, I'll go ahead and turn it to you so you can tell us a little bit about who you are.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Steph, for having me on. And I remember that coincidence, we'll say, or synchronicity of our first session and just feeling such an instant connection to you. So I'm grateful that our relationship has flourished in the year plus since. And hi to Dr. Steph's beautiful community. My name is Angelica Ray. I am a multi-hyphenate being and creative and multi-passionate woman like many of you. But my work traditionally centers around the intersection of intuition, healing, personal growth, and spirituality. So I serve in those capacities. And also, like many of you, so much of my work is in flux and is evolving right now. So I even struggle with exactly how to introduce myself, because the boxes that previously fit don't feel quite right anymore. So we'll just
I love
name
the way that you, sorry, I love the way that you introduced yourself. Perfect for me.
Thank you.
All right. So I know we've talked a little bit about what life was like when you were younger. So I would love for you to share some of that today. If you think about just your personal development or inner work journey, what was your experience?
Yeah. Oh man, it's been a long road. I will say that I grew up as a very naturally sensitive child and a very feeling person. And as a result of a lot of the experiences I had growing up, I now understand that I honed my intuition and my ability to see and feel the unseen as a safety mechanism very early on. Whether it was a way to stay safe in social situations, or even around, my caretakers and navigating their emotions. I had this kind of natural inclination towards intuition. And obviously, being so young, I didn't necessarily know what to do with that or what that all meant. So it made for a very interesting experience growing up, feeling a lot, having lots of big sensations, and not really knowing where to put them.
Yeah.
I went through, I did the college thing, kind of, matriculated, being a star student, a great performer and achiever, Dean's List 4.4. And I'm speaking to this because I know so much of your audience and so much of your community relates. So, hey, I am also your people and you are my people, but checked all the boxes and still ultimately felt really unfulfilled, except for this kind of knowing that I was meant to teach. And I didn't know exactly what I was meant to teach, but I took that calling very literally. So I found myself working at one of the largest commercial banks in the country. And instead of hitting sales goals as was required by us at the time, I was teaching financial literacy to basically anybody that would sit at my desk, and really allowing them to storytell their own experience and engage with them that way. Then I took the calling a bit more literally and moved from San Diego to Atlanta with Teach for America with the intention of
Oh, I got
teaching in
goosebumps.
high-risk community. Yeah. So I was like, okay, this teacher thing, let's take this archetype seriously. And I worked in a high
Yeah.
school for a really long time, for 6 years. And um, ultimately, I think the spirit of service within me was very disillusioned by
Hmm.
how little we can do about some of the survival mechanisms, patterns. Like, so much of it is systemic, and by the
Yeah.
time kids make it to education, if they're not, high school, I'll say, if they're not really getting the full robust training, teaching, wisdom about how to figure out who they are and what they want to do in the world, everything else is kind of a lot. I don't want to say a lost cause, but it can make it really
Yeah.
challenging
Yeah.
to do that. So I'll pause there, and
Yeah.
I'm curious if there's any questions that
Oh,
come up before I continue and
yeah.
share how
I was
I
like,
made this.
I was so zoned in. I wasn't asking any questions, but I had a few pop up. Or maybe it's just like me resonating first when you said you had a lot of big feelings when little. Me too. And I don't know if you're going to resonate. I'm just curious. I'll share my experience. I felt like I got the messaging that I shouldn't be feeling so strongly and so many things. And um I felt like something was wrong with me. And I always try to share that because I don't know, how many other people felt that way too. But I figured I'd just chime in about that and see how that lands.
Absolutely. I definitely felt that. I mean, I was the kid that used to cry on the last day of school just because of like the overwhelming feeling of change and emotion. And even
Yeah.
if the emotions were like heightened, and people were excited, just that deep sensation.
Yeah.
And people used to tell me all the time, you're such a crybaby. And so, yeah, it felt
Yeah.
really wrong to have these
Yeah.
big feelings. But ultimately, what I didn't have was the language to reference my own experience and for that internal world to be validated. And
Hmm.
that can really interesting, coping mechanisms or survival mechanisms
Yeah.
as we move
What
forward.
happened for
Yeah,
you
definitely.
when you say interesting?
Um, yeah, I think I went into, this is probably a larger conversation that we can get to, but for myself, I compensated in two ways. When I learned that it wasn't safe to reference myself, or that I didn't have language for referencing myself, my own
Hmm.
needs, my own feelings, my own desires, I learned to reference in two places. I learned to reference other people. So what did
Hmm.
they want or expect or need out of me? And how could I shapeshift to provide
Hmm.
that so that I could get
Hmm.
the validation that I needed? Or I learned, and this kind of came online a little bit later, I learned to reference this like proverbial abstract rule book of how to be a good girl, how to do
Oh
things
my
right.
gosh. I'm
And
tearing up. I'm like, this just hits. It just lands. Yes. Yes. Yep.
yeah. And so,
Hmm.
and I mean, we'll get to it, but ultimately, having understood this now, and this is a revelation that has really come online through my own work in the last couple
Yeah.
years,
Yeah.
I see this everywhere. Like, we are not alone.
No, we're
And
not alone.
there's so much freedom to be garnered in healing these parts of ourselves.
Hmm. Hmm. Mm. Yes. I know why we clicked.
Mhm.
Yeah, I didn't expect
Yeah.
to get a little teary-eyed with that. Oh my gosh. Okay. So yeah, you can say more about that. I got excited when you said Teach for America. I was in a fraternity, like a co-ed fraternity in college, and there was some connection with Teach for America. I'm actually blanking on it right now, but I was like, oh wow, I've heard of them. They do great work. But I can imagine how challenging it is, like to come in at the teenage years and try to make a difference when there's just a lot. I mean, a lot that I'm not even sure about, but a lot going on to
So much. And it's
face.
funny, I often laugh because our soul chooses exactly what it needs to learn, and sometimes we need to see
Yeah.
those lessons repeatedly. So I kind of often joke that I needed to go back to high school to do it differently, to see it differently. And so spirit, God, whatever, my soul chose to like send me back to high school to do it all over again so I could have a different
Yes.
perspective. And that was really the catalyst for my own awakening. What does it mean to, um, through my own lens, to feel purposeful, to know who I am, to show up in the world authentically, and ultimately
Mhm.
in that own journey, like what would happen if we could teach this at a younger age? Like we wouldn't have women like ourselves in our, mid 30s, 40s, even 20s, trying to figure out like who we are. And I think
Angelica,
that is,
that, oh my gosh. There's like so many things where I'm like, oh, we haven't talked about this before. But when I had like the moment that shifted everything for me, I was like, I have to share this with as many parents and educators as possible. Cause I'm like, I am going to fight this, but not really fight. But that's probably the attitude I had back then from both sides. And I'm going to change the world, man.
yes, and you have to, and it's interesting. I mean, you obviously have two daughters, young girls.
Yeah.
I have a niece, and I have a lot of friends that have children. And this generation of kids is not going for it. Like they will not
Mhm.
be what we were conditioned into. Their souls just are not here for it. So we
Yes.
do need to
Goosebumps.
advocate for them in these ways because they are like, no, like you guys really messed this thing up, and I am not. We're not here for
Yeah.
listening to
Yes.
you or the rule book.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I love that. I love that so much. Okay. So, anything else when we look at like before that experience for you, Teach for America, that shifted everything? Anything else that you want to share about how you viewed the world, how you viewed yourself, just what your experience was? So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'll say like I found myself in my office in this high school, not to mention just the energetic component of being in a space with that many humans who had that many big emotions of their own and no
Yeah.
safety to put them. So just like the energetic of that
Yes.
environment. But ultimately I found myself having a lot of anxiety attacks. And I mean, and that
Mm.
ever experienced in my life, that level of anxiety and fear and overwhelm and deep sadness.
Mm.
And I ultimately just like made a choice that I was not going to live that way. And I got really curious. I picked up every book. I woke up
Mm.
an hour earlier in the morning to read, to journal. I listened to anything I could get my hands on in terms of a resource to support me in understanding what I was going through and help me find who I actually was and what I was meant to be doing, which I'll kind of connect the dots quickly here,
Yeah.
ultimately led me to some experiences that were undeniable in terms of my psychic gifts and my intuitive abilities. And I was kind of
Yes.
nudged into using that gift more intentionally in my work with people. And so I
Mhm.
left school back in 2019. I did a
Mhm.
little bit of overlap. I ran my business and worked at the school for about a year and a half. I left to do my work full time in 2019. And since then, I've been working really one on one with people, offering readings and intuitive clarity sessions to help people feel the truth of their own self, their own experience, and gain clarity from that. And that's how
Mm.
Dr. Stephanie.
Yes, yes. I scheduled a 2022 reading and it was incredible. I'm just going to throw that in there. I think that was the first session like that I had ever done before. So I went in really not knowing what to expect. And it was fantastic. I've like referenced my notes from that, re listened to it multiple times. And I'm just going to say, um, because I'm sure some people listening are like, oh, psychic abilities? Like, I don't know about that. The things that you shared with me ended up coming true, which to me was wild. So the more I learn, the more open I am to seeing everything in the world, like versus like what's right, what's wrong. You mentioned the word curiosity, and I think that is one of the most important ways to approach yourself, period. To get curious and the world, honestly, but to get curious about, okay, what's happening for me? What's going on? It's such an important lens that helps us learn so much more. So happy you mentioned that.
Yes, I love that idea of curiosity because it really opens the door for the breadcrumbs to be presented.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that whatever higher power or organizing divine intelligence there is amongst us wants space to work with and through us. And curiosity is the doorway that allows that to happen.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Open that.
Yes.
They were open. I think we're amazed by what books fall into our lap, what conversations we come across, what synchronicities and twos occur as
Yes.
as direction on our path.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Um, when you said like what books fall into our laps, the moment that I mentioned earlier where I had, basically my awakening, or that moment that shifted everything for me, it was just a training at NASA that fell into my lap. I didn't go in like, oh, this is going to change my life. A lot had gone down where I was like open to change and seeing that, like, okay, there's things that I want to work on. And people are just like, oh, register for this program, register. So I did. And holy smokes. So when things seem to fall into your lap, roll with it. That's my 2 cents.
Yes. Oh,
Yeah.
yes. I
Okay. Oh, go ahead.
yeah, just I think that we're meant to evolve. And I think whatever force is out there is conspiring to help us do that. So the more
Mm-hmm.
open we can be to that
Mm-hmm.
process. And if someone's listening to our conversation here, the likelihood is they're open to that process.
Yes. Yes. I totally
Yeah.
agree. Okay, so you were having an anxiety attacks. I'm like, okay, we need like to finish like take us where you are now. You started reading everything you could get your hands on, doing this work. You discovered like, holy moly, this is what I meant to do. Okay, how like take us from there.
Yes. So holy moly, this is what I'm meant to do. And I have built so what I'll say is I have made a life for myself helping other people connect to their own intuition, right? I've made
Yes.
ultimately I'm not when someone comes to me, first of all, I am predictive in nature in the work that I've done, but I try to steer away from that because ultimately everybody has free will. What's most important
Yes.
is that in a session with me, somebody has an experience of the truth of their own soul and can feel themselves
Mm,
clear,
yes.
which comes back to those of us who learned to reference other people or
Mm,
reference the rule book.
mm,
And when she gets the chance to feel and experience who she is, when her
mm.
emotions are validated, when her own intuition is affirmed and seen and valued, that's when magic happens.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I resonate with that so deeply. Like well, now we've done several sessions. My brain more went to like, oh, you told me this thing and then it did happen. But you're right. Most of it was like seeing who I really am and what
Mhm.
I'm capable of, like during those sessions. And gosh, yeah. Okay. Just wanted to chime in there. And everything that you went through as a child, too, like set you up perfectly to serve in this way.
Yes, it really did. And I guess I want to tell the full story, which
Okay.
is, you know, for a long time, I was and have been serving in this capacity of one-on-one sessions. And
Mm-hmm.
what I came to see is the pattern that we just described, right? This pattern of this beautiful being, this high, quote unquote, achieving, but ultimately an awakening leader, whether she's a leader in her household, a leader in NASA, a leader
Yeah.
in, a classroom, like whatever the case is, the women that come to me are truly awakening leaders.
Mm-hmm.
And they are naturally very intuitive beings,
Mm.
either because, some of the traumas that they've experienced have cultivated that in them, or because it's a skill set they're meant to learn to use.
Mm-hmm.
And so that has really been, I guess what I'm wanting to say is the healing process in my own journey and what I've witnessed happen with other people is the more that we get curious, ask questions, learn ourselves, the more we
Mm-hmm.
learn to reference the natural intuition that is seated within us to help our
Yes.
leadership.
Had to chime in there. Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah. And I know
Like,
you've seen that in your own life. I've watched you really blossom and bloom as you've learned
mm-hmm.
to trust the voice of your own intuition and reference
Mm-hmm.
that as a guidepost.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep, yep. And now whenever I have the experience of I didn't listen to my intuition, I don't beat myself up about it. I'm like, oh, this is just another reminder to tune in and to honor myself. And so
Yes.
I'm
Yeah.
sharing that so others can do that too. You don't have to beat
Yeah.
yourself up. You can just like, okay, this is another reminder I needed. Yeah. Mm.
Yes. That's so true. And like any good relationship, it is fostered by dialogue, right? If I continuously go to a friend for, you know, advice or support and then basically discard everything that friend tells me, the chain of communication, the link of communication is not going to be as strong as it is if I'm honoring what's there. And so the more that we listen to our intuition, the more that the intuition within us trusts that it is a reliable friend and guidepost, the more
Mm.
it will feel. So it's a muscle that can be strengthened.
Yes. I feel that like 100%. That's been my experience.
Mm,
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
that.
So what else is coming up for you right now? Where are you now? I mean, you've shared a little bit about, more about what you do, how you view the world, just anything else coming up around there?
Yeah, maybe I've said this before, but I'll say it again.
Mm-hmm.
I'm much less interested in, for all of the reasons we've talked about, intuitive reading right now, and I'm much more interested in helping women, supporting awakening and emerging leaders heal those patterns of referencing other and
Yeah.
referencing the rules and learning to reference themselves. That is like
Yes.
the crux of my work right now. And there's some basic developmental skills that I never got, that I had to kind of learn the hard way, as many of us did, and bump
Mm-hmm.
into a lot. But once the dots started clicking and these skill sets started coming online, and I learned how to feel enough on my own, how to have a measure for what is good enough, how to reference the full spectrum of my own sensation, that has been the catalyst. I'm happier than I've ever been in my life. I'm more fulfilled than I've ever been in my life. And I had a birthday a few months ago, and I posted that, like, a year ago, my life looked very much the same as it does right now. I live in the same building. I drive the same car. I like, on the
Mm-hmm.
surface, it looks the same, but to me, living it feels like a completely different person as a result of
Oh,
creating space for some of these skill sets
I
to.
love that. Yeah. And your focus aligns so much with the work that I'm doing in a different way. But how do we say F the rules and let go of all of the shoulds and do what you want, honor what you want? and tap back into, okay, what am I feeling? What do I actually want to do? If nobody was telling me you should, if there was no
Mm.
right way. Yeah.
And that's so important because if we look around at the world and it's like these rule books haven't really gotten us very far,
No.
like who made the rules and what are they, how are they really serving us? Because if I look around, there's so many aspects
Yes.
of this life that have been created by rules that serve people that don't look anything like me or you or, a lot of us out here. So I really see it as a pathway to creating a new world and a new experience that we want to live
Mhm.
in.
Mhm. I couldn't agree more. Thank you so much for sharing. I have one last question I want to ask. Is there anything you want to share about yourself or your journey before I ask the final question?
I don't think there's anything else, but I will make kind of like a plea to anyone who finds this
Yeah.
to commit to the path of feeling yourself, commit to the path of validating and being in spaces and places that reflect back to you the validity of your own experience. Uh, if and just begin to become aware of how much you reference outside of yourself for how you should be or do in the world, and what happens if you just make one small adjustment to honor your own experience today.
Mhm. Love that. What if you don't make yourself wrong?
Mm,
Mm. Love that so
yes.
much. Okay. So for women listening who are high achievers, like us, why, and maybe they're asking, why am I like this? It could be having panic attacks or, emotional outbursts or just feeling like she's different. What advice do you have for her if she has these moments where she feels kind of broken?
Yeah. Whew, okay. Oh, there's lots to say. Oh, there's so much coming through right now. Okay. The first thing I want to say is number one, you are not broken. These are mechanisms that your system has designed to keep you safe and allow you to survive in the best possible way that you
Mm.
could, because you had unmet needs in development, most likely. Like that's just the truth of what it is.
Yep.
It usually comes back to our childhood. And so
Yep.
these symptoms are ultimately the result of a coping mechanism or a survival pattern that was created to
Mhm.
help you survive. And in
Mhm.
that, can you not make yourself wrong
Mhm.
and simply acknowledge that you would like a new way forward?
Yes.
That's the
Yes.
first thing.
Oh.
The second thing that really is coming through is that it doesn't have to, you don't have to feel this way. It doesn't have to be this way. And the louder these things are showing up for you, the bigger the purpose is on the other side of them. So
Mm.
when you allow the magnitude, like I really feel this as your soul screaming at you from the inside, trying to get your
Mm.
attention. And can you see the magnitude and the depth and the texture of that cry for help as directly proportionate to the power and the magnitude of your purpose?
I love that so much. So much. N- Real quick, it reminds me of a reel that I shared the other day in my stories on Instagram. And I'm probably not going to get this quite right, but it was basically like if you're feeling like discontent, this like something's not right here, your soul's trying to get you to move. Listen.
Mm,
And I never felt like at peace totally. I love NASA. I loved working there. I loved the people, the mission, all of it. But something was missing and I didn't feel at peace.
mm,
And there's so many people who have that experience and they push that away, they ignore it, and they just continue doing what they're doing. And you have that for a reason.
It's guidance. Yes. And
Yes.
that's such a beautiful barometer uh, to see, like, there's so many aspects of your life that maybe did feel really good and, on paper made a lot of sense. But if your
Mm-hmm.
soul is not settled in them, and there's a difference between the piece of being, the contentment of being like complacent, and that there's a difference there, and we know that
Yes.
difference. And so
Yes.
we're not always meant to feel comfortable. We're not always meant to feel perfectly at peace, but is it because you're not where you need to be, or because you're being stretched into something bigger and greater?
Yes. Yep. Exactly. Totally resonate. Okay. So for women listening today who are like, oh my gosh, this was amazing. I want to connect with Angelica. What's the best way for people to find you? And just you can share anything else about your business that you'd like to.
Yeah, absolutely. So I do use Instagram, maybe not as faithfully as one running a business in 2023/2024 should, but you can find me on Instagram at Angelica Ray, and I'm open to conversations in the DMs and all of that good stuff. I love to converse. So if you heard something here that really resonates for you, I would love to hear from you in my DMs so we can chat a little bit more about it. I offer a embodiment experience called Elemental, which is a breath based. It's not even it's truly a practice that really supports clearing the clutter, that mental, emotional, energetic clutter that helps you to feel the truth and reference the truth. So you
Mm.
can find Elemental in the link in my profile, and I usually host group sessions about once a month, and those are pay what you want. It's just my way of getting people into themselves and into their body. So please come
Mm.
join that. And then I offer deeper one-on-one mentorship. And that's really where the transformation happens, and where we have the opportunity to go into these patterns, to uproot them, and to really learn the texture, the sensation of your own soul, so that you can begin to live from that place. And all of the information from that can be found in the link in my profile on Instagram, or also by contacting me from my website, angelicaray.com.
Thank you so much for sharing. And I'll put links in the show notes as well. So people can just open that up and click right to you and find you with ease. Thank you so much for coming on today. I appreciate you so much.
Thank you for having me. And I'm so grateful for this beautiful community that you're cultivating, and a place for women like us to see each other, feel each other, and expand together.